And, we've got a unique technology that produces a unique carbon. Where we went different, we discovered that the batch process would allow us to keep our product at temperature for 8 to 10 hours, where the rest of the industry went with what's called fast paralysis. And they basically use what I call heated screws. They try to auger the material through a heat zone, and it stays in that zone less than a minute.
I'm really excited. I'm excited to have you on and get through my day so I can go out and play the rest of the day. Just kidding. I have a board meeting.
Happy birthday, man.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm really excited to have you on, James. For anybody that's listening or just joining or joins later, please feel free to like, share, comment, ask James any questions or chime in. Also, all of our content is available full-length videos and edited content on Patreon.com/globalhempassociation.org. I'll add it to the bottom of the screen. But James, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'll kind of turn it over to you. I'd love an intro and to hear from you. How did you get to where you're at with biochar, and what really drove you here? So,
all right.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll give you the thumbnail sketch, because we've been doing this over 12 years now. It was supposed to be a 6-month project, and now it's over 12 years and over 20 million into this thing. But it started because I've always been into alternative technologies, green technologies. My last deal was an electric bus company, and when that company sold, I had a little extra money and basically bought a bunch of property in the mountains in Colorado. I was one of those evil people because they can't seem to buy up a national forest, right? So I had like a 50-acre piece in the middle of it. Then all the trees died on me. So with the beetle kill wiped out Colorado. So then this company was trying to figure out what to do with the dead trees, because it's trying to figure out a way to make money off the dead trees. That way you could afford to clean up the forest. And so basically I took some sketches on a napkin. Well, first I'd heard about biochar, like a lot of people hear about biochar, and I flew around the country trying to find a technology that I could just use. Well, after about the third trip, when the machines weren't working, I realized nobody had a technology, so we had to develop our own. And so we've been working on that for a lot of years now. We've got 16 patents. We've fully protected in the U.S. and in Canada. And we've got a unique technology that produces a unique carbon. Where we went different, we discovered that the batch process would allow us to keep our product at temperature for 8 to 10 hours, where the rest of the industry went with what's called fast paralysis. And they basically use what I call heated screws. They try to auger the material through a heat zone, and it stays in that zone less than a minute. Well, if you're comparing carbons that stayed at temperature for 8 hours versus a carbon that stayed at temperature for a minute, you can imagine there's differences at the molecular level. And that's where we come in. In fact, we're the only carbon that has formal approval by the government agencies that we have approval with, and the federal government. No other carbon has all the approvals we have. In fact, and then no other carbons have the properties that we have either. I mean, not to get too far into the weeds, but we make a really unique carbon that has very unique outcomes. So as we speak through this call and this video, when I speak about biochar, I'm speaking about our carbon and our properties. I can't speak about the inferior products that are out there as residues from people chasing oils or power or stuff. Boiler ash is basically what it is. So, but that's where we ended up. And then after we invented the technology, it was happenstance. I'm not going to pretend that it was anything but that. We didn't have proper controls on our first equipment, and we went to temperatures you're not supposed to go to, or nobody had ever bothered to go to before, and it just makes a unique carbon with unique properties. And so now all the patents and all the controls we have basically are controlling that screw up we made to begin with and come out with the product that we do. We also have some uses patented, like we have a patent to clean up mine wastewater, acidic mine wastewater, both in the US and Canada. We have a patent that cleans up algae blooms in the US. We work with all the major corporations on cleaning up Superfund sites and stuff. But on the hemp, where the hemp comes in, is we also have a patent because we bind all the phosphorus that we come in contact with and the nutrients. So, in our raw state, you don't have to post-treat it, like some carbons, they have to add all kind of chemicals to it to make it bind chemicals, which kind of doesn't make sense if you're trying to do an organic grow. So anyway, so we bind the nutrients. The easiest thing for the hemp guys to understand, and we've got plenty of satisfied customers that'll vouch that we increase yield 200 to 300%. So the numbers are real. And so what happens is we're like a battery in the soil. We bind the fertilizers that they're putting out there, and we bind the water. And then that's how we increase the yield. It just shows that when you're fertilizing and you're irrigating, you're washing most of your fertilizer out of the root zone, and we keep it in the root zone and release it to the plants. So that's the simplest way to explain the benefits in the hemp world. But we do have, coming from Colorado, that's where we got our street cred, or whatever you want to call it. That's where we got all the scars across our back, because the guys here, when before it became legal and as it was getting legal, they were willing to try anything to get increased yield. And we actually were one of the things that worked. So anyway, that's a nickel version of our company. I can't hear. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's my fault. I had a lawnmower outside, so I hurried and muted myself really quick so that you couldn't hear it. But I look at hemp as a small piece to what you're doing, and I'm sure you do too, right? When you talk about being able to clean up, what are they called? Super something sites?
Superfund sites, yeah.
Yeah. Talk to me about this, because this is where, we talk a lot about the tribes or water, and a lot of my members that are involved in the tribe, the water rights and the cleanups are, big conversations. And I live in Utah, where we've got a lake that needs cleaned up, and it's a big conversation. And so talk to me about how does this work, and what does it mean to clean up the site?
All right. Well, what we do, we bind heavy metals and toxins as well. We also bind PCBs and mercury and PFAS. We have a new test showing we bind PFAS with our product. So whatever toxin is out there, we can bind it up. We have data showing that. So what we've done in the past, there's a lot of them I can't speak of because there's ongoing litigation, and whenever I supply product, you have to kind of keep quiet about it. But there was one big deal that was made public, and that is with DuPont. They polluted hundreds of miles of river in Virginia. 1929 or something, they built the first rayon factory, and part of the waste out of that factory was mercury. And in the old days, they would just dump it in the river. That's what back in those days. And then so the mercury never washed out. So what ended up happening, they did a bunch of testing. They were able to work our product into the river banks and stuff to bind up the mercury. And as part of the testing, they discovered our carbon bound mercury 5 times better than any other carbon they were working with. And we were a fraction of the cost. So it was one of those things where, and then they had to do animal studies where, so there's a lot of work that was done on that one project that allows us to do a lot of things on other projects without going through the same work. So like the animal studies, where the question becomes, okay, you've got the mercury bound up in the carbon. What happens if an earthworm is eating the carbon, or this in the body, and it goes through a fish and goes to a bird? They discovered that our carbon kept the toxins bound up through the digestive system. So the worst thing that would happen is maybe the carbon gets deposited a little bit further away from the site, but it stays bound out of the food web. And so now we're working extensively with a bunch of Indian tribes, Native Americans all over the North America, well, the U.S. and Canada's First Nations. I'm getting the terminology down. But so like we're working really closely right now with the Cherokee in Oklahoma. I mean, our government, they put them on a piece of land that was naturally a Superfund site. The whole freaking reservation's lead toxic. But so we're working with them on the Tar Creek project. We're working, there's just a lot of projects we're working on with the Native Americans. I haven't found a reservation yet, unless it's the ones that happen to be located at corners of interstates with casinos. All the other reservations, they all seem to have a Superfund site on them. It's amazing. In fact, the Native Americans told me 75% of the Superfund sites in the U.S. are located on tribal land. And a lot of it is self-imposed. The white man would dump chemicals out there and everybody looked the other way, that kind of stuff. Some of it's naturally occurring. Like the Cherokee, they were mining rock or chat. Well, come to find out, it was all extremely lead toxic, the whole area. So as they were digging stuff out, they were digging up lead, and then the irony is most of the bullets in the wars were, came off all those lead deposits. And, but then they leave it there and, then it's up to the Indians to clean it up. But we're working through all that. It's been great working with them because, there are advantages to working with Native Americans. They have the Super 8A and things like that where they have the power, if they exercise it, to get things dealt with. It's historically they just haven't exercised it, and so that's what
trust.
Huh?
There's we talk about good product and bad product, and how do you know what product is good?
And that's what they did a lot of due diligence. Now they understand the difference in what's a good carbon, what's a bad carbon, what the properties are. And they were actually looking to use hemp to remediate a lot of their areas. So now it's a combination of our carbon and hemp that they're using to remediate some of the stuff. But even when you use the hemp and you're binding up some of these chemicals, what are you going to do with the hemp when you harvest it, in that situation? So it's our process of making the carbon can be a virtuous circle because we can use those raw materials.
Okay, so when we talk about applying, you throw some numbers out. 200 to 300% increase in yield is.
Yeah, that's what the guys down in Colorado realized down around Pueblo. And really what it's showing is just how poor the soil was there. Okay. I mean, but even guys in greenhouses will get 30-40% yield increases. But it just shows that when you're in poorer soils, which most hemp, they seem to be growing it in poor soils. That's why people get into the business to give a crop on poor soil. That just showing how much the fertilizer they're putting out there is just washing out of the field without any benefit.
Okay, so talk to me about how it's applied. I've seen it, on trucks driving through the field, almost like a fertilizer,
Yeah, I mean, we have 4 different sizes. We have a size that goes through a manure spreader. We have a size that goes through like a spinning wheel fertilizer spreader. We have a size that goes through air seeders, and we have a size that'll go through center pivots. So this is all the same product. We make it in a larger chunk, and then we beat it down into smaller sizes and screen it out. So depending on what equipment the local farmer has, we have a size that goes through that equipment. However, they're currently applying, whether they're applying manure or applying commercial fertilizer, we have a size that will go through their equipment because you can't be offering a product that requires a special piece of equipment. So we have it, we can, whatever they have, we can fit to what they have.
Okay, so when I was at NOCO talking to your team before you got there, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but as a consumer, how do I know, or where do I go? What do I look at to know if I'm going to explore biochar as an alternative, for fertilizer or for my farm and crops? From appearance, I understand there's something to look at as a consumer to know whether it's a good carbon or bad carbon are going to work or not going to work? Can you kind of break that down for consumers or for for any of your customers?
No, I mean, basically, I mean, if you dig deep enough, you'll discover we're the only one that's even approved by the EPA for production and release into the environment. But that's more focused on large corporations and governments. But the simple tests, like if somebody buys a 5-gallon bucket off of Amazon, A, I can tell you right now, it's not going to be high quality. But B, the easy way to test is it's called a soap test. Or I'll tell you what, there's 2 tests. Basically, put it under light. If it shines, it's good carbon, because bad carbon will still have oils and nasty stuff still on the carbon. So it'll be dull. So if you put it under a bright light, and if it really shines like a diamonds or reflects like a mirror, then all the bad stuff is off the outside. Then to see if the stuff is out the inside, you literally can take it and just rub it in your hands. And if you can wash your hands with water and it becomes clean, then that's an easy test as well. The carbons you'll find in, like, on those little 5-gallon buckets or whatever, they're still full of oils and tars, and you don't know what's in those things, because it could be toxic. It could be clean. I'm not going to, there could be an organic, but it could easily be toxin. California passed state legislature to regulate the quality of the carbon because there was one company importing crap from Vietnam and Russia, and they poisoned people's fields. They called it biochar, but they literally poisoned fields that won't be good for decades now. So they had to pass some laws regulating the quality, but they still, because everything has to be fair, they backed off the quality so far, it still allows some bad carbons out there. But if you do the soap test and the light test, anybody can do that. And basically, if you wash it off, it just, you can, and it just makes logic. If there's some oils and stuff left in there, you don't know what's in that stuff. And it's not.
I was amazed how clean it was as I ran my hand through it. I mean, it's shiny. Each little piece is reflective and shiny. And it was a great, education, especially as biochar comes up all the time in our group now. People are constantly
and that's the easiest test to do. It pretty much, if you've got it, it's shiny. I mean, it's a way with your own eyes you can see if there's any oils or tars or creosotes left in the carbon. And if that's still in there, it could be toxic to your plants. No, it's going to be toxic to the environment, but it also could be toxic to your plants.
What drove your passion to get into this? Like, what really you've been in it for a minute, but where did you really get in and say, hey, I've got something that's a real solution for our environment?
When I made a homemade kiln and we went, like I say, the temperatures got away from us, and a friend of mine is a master gardener, an acquaintance. So, this is 12 years ago. So you were reading stuff on the internet that, oh yeah, this stuff's supposed to be good for plants. Well, I gave her a bag of it and she didn't trust me. So she took it to the local college, and they came back to her and asked her where she got it because they couldn't recreate it in the lab. And then the next week I had senior executives from the top people of the Colorado Forest Service on my land trying to figure out how we made it, because they were saying, this could be a solution for the beetle kill problem because it gives a market to waste wood. And since then it's gone from there. And like anything we sell to the ag industry, it's certified organic. But we've carried this technology to such a level now that we're the only pyrolysis technology right now that's approved by the government to destroy treated woods. And we turn that into a pure carbon as well. That actually meets European food standards, but I'm not stupid enough to get into that PR battle. So we use that carbon for, like, we can destroy railroad ties, utility poles, and not destroy, we convert it into carbon and we break down all the emissions. But we use that for plastics additive and concrete additive. So we can get rid of the treated woods as well. So we've even carried the technology to that level. But anything we sell into the ag world is from the trees come out of a national forest. or you have to be able to trace the tree to come from a clean source to claim organic. And so everything we sell into the ag world or the hemp world is organically certified.
Awesome. Okay, so where do you see this going? Where you're at, where you've been, and kind of this journey. Understanding the cleanup is such a big concern, and I see so many concerned consumers, really worried about sourcing and what's clean and ethically. What are we doing to our planet?
Oh yeah, no. In fact, we're always getting visits by news people. In fact, I just did a 15-minute video that'll be. We just turned it in. It'll be aired by the Worldwide Earth Day on Earth Day, earthday.org. There'll be over 10 million views. I have to do social media advertising. I don't know if this counts, but I mean, if they hear, but it's but so we're being sought out. This year's Earth Day is on regenerative agriculture, and we've been highlighted as as a company to be broadcast worldwide. So there's just so many things. I mean, the regenerative agriculture movement, carbon credits now are very valuable. That we're being sought out by a lot of industrial companies, all the oil industry. They're trying to figure out their carbon strategies with this new administration, and everything we produce counts for carbon credits, is carbon negative. So we're like a 12-year-old overnight success, and we've got a bunch of contracts overseas now. We're expanding globally. We're finalizing a massive financing for our global expansion. So it's been a unique journey. I mean, we're still fighting off the people who don't know what they're doing, and it's two steps forward, one steps back, because we really have to ramp up as we move forward. We're going to have to ramp up education and through opportunities like this. So I appreciate it, because when people get interested in carbon or biochar, and then they get a bad batch of stuff, it kills whatever they have, and they get a bad taste in their mouth. When if it's done properly, it really can save the world, heal the world. And that's the theme that one of my investors put on the company, because feed the world, heal the world, because we can greatly increase yield of crops, but we can clean up the mess. And when you're at, I think, 9 billion people now, or whatever we are, and we're just growing exponentially, we got to clean up the mess. We got to feed everybody and not take up too much more land, but you also got to clean up the mess. And like, we're working with all these neat companies. Like, there's one company we're working with out of Canada. They've come up with a patented process to take cattle manure, which there's 275 million tons of cattle manure in this country, and feedlots, if you can imagine. That's just an astronomical number, but that's the manure that's in the feedlots. Now it gets spread on farm fields or whatever, but it doesn't stay in the root zone. It all ends up in the water table, basically, and down in the Gulf, and you got a dead zone or whatever. But they've come up with a patented process to use our carbon, combine it with their process, and they come out with a fertilizer pellet that concentrates the nutrients 7 to 10 times. And we bind all the nutrients to where they don't leach. And because their process throws off, they can sell electricity from their process, they end up with a organic manure pellet that at the same cost as regular manure. So there's all these neat little technologies that are coming along that are ready, and they're commercially available, and they're going out to market, that will be game changers throughout the world, and clean up the messes while we're increasing the food supply. And it's an interesting little deal, and it's very, very extremely cost effective. I mean, we're cleaning up lakes from algae all around the country, pennies on the dollar. Like this, lately you saw this lake down in Florida that's leaching all this pollution, right? The dam's about to give. We could have cleaned that lake up for less than $100,000, and now they're saying they need 200 million just to repair it where it quits leaking. It's like, we could have cleaned the whole damn thing up for $100,000 worth of product.
So what do you think? What do you think needs to happen to bridge this gap? As more and more, and I think you've said this and probably experienced this, right? Where you're almost discredited because the cost is not $200 million. Right?
That's exactly, it's happening all over. We've put in proposals, like the state of Ohio, to clean the Maumee River. We didn't even get a response. They didn't even dignify us with a response because our costs, I mean, I can only guess why. Same thing like on other major projects. And that's another reason we're working with the Native Americans, because the Native Americans could just cut through all that BS. You know, they get first dibs on some of these contracts. And so that's the way we're going to have to go around it, because there was one project we bid. The government had $4 billion allocated to clean up. We bid 50 million. They wanted to spend the 4 billion, you know, so we were discounted out of that because, you know, so it's just the reality of the world. But with the Native Americans, see, we can clean up the Superfund sites for pennies on the dollar. So now the Native Americans are getting to choose how they spend their funds, and they want their land clean. They don't want dirt just moved from one area to another. So things are working. You know, the guys I work with the Native Americans, they call themselves the first environmentalists. So they have a different viewpoint toward it. They want it cleaned up because that's their homeland.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this goes to the value of what you're doing and the research and being approved and understanding the difference. And because like you said, it takes one bad apple and then
and then you get everybody else, you know, that had some black boiler ash because the boiler didn't quite consume it all the way. I've got biochar too. Yeah, well, so then we have to go back and re-educate that consumer. But you know, it's going. Like we're hitting critical mass. Our customers have cleaned up probably over 100 water bodies nationwide so far in that niche. The fertilizer pellets are coming online. We've got major projects with concrete and with asphalt additives. So I mean, things in plastics. So a lot of things are starting to come online. It's just been one of those things where, you know, we had to focus on corporations that did testing. As long as they actually test, we win. You know, I can't sell against some guy selling snake oil on Amazon or anything like that. And I don't try to. We'll just re-educate those people later. But the large corporations, as long as they test, we win. And that's what we focused on. And now they finally are hitting critical mass, because everything we do, each market, we either outperform the incumbent at the same price, or we clean something up at a fraction of the cost before. Each market's a little bit different.
Well, and you had mentioned, you know, a lot of times you're coming back in after another one has already failed.
Right? Oh yeah, I've stood in boardrooms of major lawn care companies and got crucified because the last biochar they tested killed everything in their greenhouses. Well, you know, so and then what makes yours different? So then you have to go through the whole process again and start from testing from scratch, which is great. But I've been at this 12 years now, and some of those testing cycles lasted 5, 6, 7 years to prove the claims we were making. Because then it's like, oh, well, these results are so good, they must be wrong. So let's do the test again, which is good. I mean, it's like we've gotten through it all now. But and you know,
the education is the piece that takes the longest, right? If everybody's doing it right, it's easy to sell your product because everybody knows about it.
That's it. Well, like in the hemp world, I mean, you know, everybody that uses it has great results, but then they all keep it secret to themselves. It's like, okay, well, I'm not sharing my results with anybody. I mean, so basically, I do have a few farm managers that will share their results, but even there, it's like, you know, unless they post something on Facebook, they never tell anybody anything about what we're doing.
Isn't that so true? Especially in this industry. And that's kind of why we built what we did as far as our association, and having as many of these education series is really to provide opportunity to talk about it and figure out what works. I'm tired of hearing farmers say they lost and there's someone right next to them that did the same thing the year before that we could have helped prevent just by, let's share what these results are. It's better.
Exactly. Well, even the panel you saw that I was on at NOCO Hemp, those guys on the panel all use my product, but it didn't come out until they're talking to the crowd, but it's like, but that's what helps make their product that much more effective, because they were microbe guys, and we're a home for microbes. I mean, there's so many different things the biochar can focus on. We make an excellent home for microbes for everybody that believes microbes are the next hottest thing. We bind the nutrients. So depending on where the person's focus is, we can tailor our message to that farmer.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier plastics. Cody actually just dropped a comment a little while ago, but wondering if this is if there's a potential for biochar to be a solution for microplastics.
Okay, I'm assuming what he's talking there is as a filtration for microplastics. And there has been studies done by universities that show a good quality biochar will filter out microplastics from water. But on the flip side, what we're doing on plastics, though, more is that we can be added as a filler to the junk plastics that are going into the landfill now. Because even when you recycle now, you spend all your time recycling, most of that goes in the landfill because there's not a market for all that plastic. The Tide bottles and stuff like that have a market, but classes 1 through 7, 1 and 2 have a market. Everything else goes into your landfill. That people just don't understand that because it's just too weak, to recycle. So what we can do is you can add our carbon to that weak stuff, mix it up, melt it down, turn it into new pellets. It turns into a new resin that is actually 2.5 times stronger than other resins at half the weight, or 47% of the weight. So we take out a lot of the weight. We greatly increase the strength, which allows the junk resins to basically then be used in commercial applications. Yeah, so that's where we add a lot of benefit to, like as an example, we're currently in testing with all the major companies, like for plastic pallets or plastic lumber, because if you can increase the strength of a plastic pallet by quite a bit more and take the weight out, then that helps, freight, everything in transportation. Same thing on plastic lumber. In Canada, they've just awarded a contract for 5G to a certain company, and part of the deal is they have to come up with junk plastic into the telephone towers or cell phone towers. Well, to make it work, our biochar is going to be used. So there's a lot of little niches where people are trying to force benefits. But once again, to answer Cody's question, there is data out there that biochar will bind microplastics out of the water treatment systems.
That's incredible. Well, I'm even more intrigued about plastics. Like I want to talk more about this.
You're welcome. You're welcome to talk all you want about it. In fact, I literally this morning, I just got back test data from a major corporation that provides a lot of the componentry to the automobile industry, and we're moving forward in a very big way. We had to get by a couple of legal issues, which you always have to with these large corporations, because it's like, so, but no, it's extremely intriguing stuff. And then we're also working with the major railroads. I mean, in a perfect world, if you can imagine this, we take the used railroad ties in, we turn them into a pure carbon, destroy all the toxins in our emission control system. We break them down to elemental molecules, so there's no toxic emissions. And then you use that carbon right back into plastic railroad ties, make them strong enough to withstand. It can become a virtuous circle. So there's so many areas where you can do virtuous circles, take stuff out of the landfill, keep it out of the oceans. Because, look, if there's a market, people will quit throwing stuff on the ground and then quit going, So if you create a market, instead of telling people not to do anything, if you say, dude, you're throwing away money, then all of a sudden a lot less will go into the oceans. And so that's where we're working on these virtuous circle deals.
Talk to me about hemp plastic and biochar, right? There's a lot of movement from the polymer-based or polyethylene to hemp plastics. Where does biochar fall in, in this research piece?
Yeah, I did. In fact, what's ironic, I just signed an NDA this morning with a company doing a major move in hemp plastic. So I can't name the company, but what we do, here's the problem, and here's where we add a solution. Okay. The problem with current plastic lumber, whether it's wood fiber, hemp fiber, or whatever, you can have a mold issue because mold will grow on the lignins in the hurd or the sawdust if it's you're using wood. Well, when you carbonize it, mold can't grow on our carbon. There's nothing there to grow. There's no lignin. It's just carbon, so the mold can't grow. And then so you can either carbonize the hemp, use that in plastic, or you add the carbon to the hurd when you're going into the plastics to increase strength and kind of cut down on some of the mold risk. So we can either be added to the hurd to increase the strength, or if you carbonize it in our system, then basically you've got the strength and no potential of mold growing into the plastic lumber. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and of course, all I'm thinking is the medical field for plastics, right? To be able to.
Yeah. I mean, we make a pure carbon. When it comes out, it's totally pure and it's totally, it's clean. I guess if you harvested it with clean suits, you can do anything you want with it. But yeah, but where the people I'm working with in the hemp plastic is for like lumber and stuff, trying to get major markets. I mean, I'm sure you can get specialized, do like little blunt containers or whatever. But I mean, you got to get rid of you got to get rid of fields of this stuff. The Native Americans are looking at planting hundreds of thousands of acres, and they're not looking at little niche products. They're looking at stuff that can basically move massive amounts of industrial hemp.
I also look at these industrial markets for the textiles and the plastic coating they put on their boat tarps and their
the feed. The hemp feed's going to be massive.
Sure.
Massive. I'm working with companies that are doing hemp feed. You can't do that let's put it this way. On Native American soil, it's a sovereign nation. So there's a lot of good work being done on feed, and they're getting incredible prices for the beef. I mean, I can tell you $3.50 a pound on the hoof for hemp fed beef, which is amazing to me. And then I realized, I know the FDA is not allowing it out in the real world, but on the Indian reservation, they can do it.
Well, and everything you see, I know like the Hemp Feed Coalition is working hard at it also, and organizations like that to bring light to it.
When there's money like that available and it's a better beef, it's better quality and everything else, sooner or later the FDA has to get out of the way. And we've been certified as organic animal feed additive. We had to go around the FDA with the last administration, but they got the USDA to approve us and exempt us from FDA oversight. So we had to go a different route. And I didn't even think about using the Native American lands.
Right. Well, what a journey you've been on. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where are you guys headed? And
try to get as big as we can and solve as many problems as we can. That's it. I mean, because we really, if we're going to keep populating this earth the way we're doing, we've got to figure out a way to feed people without cutting down turning everything into ag land. So we can greatly increase the yield. We got to clean up the messes. I mean, I'm born and raised, come from South Louisiana. There aren't any old people down there, or if they're old, they've already survived cancer. It's just because it's such a toxic environment. I mean, when I'd go visit my parents before they passed, there wasn't anybody over 60 that hadn't had a cancer in there. But we lived in a poor neighborhood, I mean, I'd see they'd have chemical spill in the bayou, and they'd go out and pick the fish out with a net, and eat the fish. It's like, what are you doing? But that's just the environment. That's the way it is in this world. In certain areas, they're just dumping grounds, and that's all got to get cleaned up. And we can do it. We can do it. Just gotta, and we can do it cost effectively, and we can do it while getting rid of other waste. That's the irony. Like if you get rid of a toxic piece of lumber or dead trees, all the carbon would have went back in the air. It's not like we're going out cutting down virgin forests. This company was totally built around waste wood, whether it's a dead tree, an old crate, pallet, railroad tie, whatever. The idea is divert the waste wood. Give you a factoid that always amazes me. 1/6 of all the trees cut down in the U.S. go to make pallets, and the average turn on a pallet is less than 2 turns. So just stop and think about that. All that waste wood that was going to landfills, so we can, and we are diverting it currently in Colorado. Um, that we can turn into a carbon that literally just survived to make a little over 1 turn on a pallet. But things like that, people don't. I never realized 1/6 of all the trees cut down went to make pallets, but that's a lot of wood that just would go into the landfill and convert into methane. And we're working currently like with a group in northern Florida. They all that blowdown timber from Hurricane Michael. You can go convert that into carbon. I mean, they're currently piling it up and burning it. That's just putting it right back in the air. All these little niches all around the country. All the fire.
All these big, land hurricanes and tornadoes.
Yeah, and we're chasing fires now. These massive forest fires. We're working we can use those charred trees. I mean, I'm fighting with the government trying to harvest them, but that's another story. But we can go in and clean up basically a burnt forest, convert that further into our carbon, but more importantly, remove those snags and those trees out of the forest where the sun can hit the ground and the forest can regenerate a lot quicker. Because if you just leave as overpopulated these forests are that are getting burnt, it's just going to take forever to repopulate because the land has been sterilized. And you just got to get that stuff out of there where the sun can, and the rain and the wind can do its job.
So after we talk and the more that I've looked into this and understanding hemp and where my passion is, for me, it's like, well, why aren't we using this? What are the objections you're hearing, and what's this hiccup that's stopping everybody from using a good biochar or from utilizing this as a tool to clean up the lakes?
Well, it's education, and then it's like I said earlier, it's a lot of people out there selling bogus product. Look, if you think the hemp is a scatterbrain snake oil industry right now, if you Google biochar, there's 1 million hits, and when we're the only one that's got the legal approvals that we have out of over 1 million hits, I mean, I think we're way above hemp and snake oil people in our industry. And but it's just going to take time. You're just like the hemp. All the guys who thought they're going to get in and make $1 million and lied to everybody, they're gone. And same thing's got to happen in our industry. And I even saw today there was a company put out a press release. They just raised a couple of $1 million, and they said they were the first ones to make. Basically what their press release was, they're the first ones to make biochar for water filtration. This industry's been doing that for forever. But they were able to raise a couple of $1 million and put out a press release with all the bogus stuff on it. 2 of the largest financial scams in the last decade were biochar scams. Companies that raised hundreds of millions of dollars and never produced 1 pound of biochar. So it kind of reminds you of the hemp, right? All these guys, out there going to raise all this money, buy all this seed, and never did anything. So that's where we're at. But it's shaking out now, and it just took a while for all the testing to get done, because we were not publicizing anything we were doing. Because if I put out a press release, the next thing I knew, or if I gave somebody a PowerPoint, then some other company had my PowerPoint with their name on it.
Well, and there's been a lot of attention brought to cleanup and brought
yes
more, and not just in biochar. You look at the documentaries that are around the water condition of our water and the condition. I mean, it takes massive education to bring attention to things that we don't touch and see and feel.
Oh, I'll tell you. And everything's polluted. Look, here in Colorado, we operate not far from Rocky Mountain National Park. Mm-hmm. They are finding massive nutrient pollution in alpine lakes above where nothing can get to it, but it's even coming from rain. I mean, the pollution is just everywhere. And that's what it takes. And now finally the science is catching up, showing people that this is bad. I mean, because when we were young, when I was young, not you, but when I was young, a lot of the things now that we know is bad, that was what we were recommended to do, that we didn't know, but science is finally catching up. And, it's cheaper now to clean up the problem than to hide the problem. So finally it's gotten to that stage.
Well, it's finally bad enough. We can't hide it, right?
That's it. That's it.
And I think it's finally our consumers are finally educated enough. And I can tell you, I am guilty of not being educated as to where my clothes are made or how damaging the dye is or where the water's. I didn't know. Equally as much, I would probably be a vegetarian if I had to raise my own meat.
They destroyed the hemp industry way back when because it was so effective. The pharmaceutical guys couldn't make money, and the oil guys couldn't make money, so they destroyed those industries. Now they've come back full circle. So same thing. With us, sooner or later you realize that you can't keep piling up the waste in landfills and hope it stays out of the water and things like that. And then, what's amazing now is like in California, they're banning treated wood from the landfills. I can make more money converting treated wood into carbon than I make selling the carbon, just because they have to do something with it.
Sure.
So it's taken a long time, but the education is caught up and action is caught up. And look, at the end of the day, the horse is out of the barn, I guess is the easiest way to say it. Like, I couldn't give away carbon credits before this last election, and Trump's administration helped us greatly. So he put out an executive order in support of our company. He did all he could, but he was limited because nobody would listen to him. But now, literally the carbon credits I can sell are worth 30 times what they were before the election. It's just that kind of, because now people are scrambling because they have to figure out and after you have 4 years of this, that genie's not going back in the bottle. Even if it goes back, it's still, it's advanced too far. Same thing like with the cleanups, like everybody's realizing these chemicals go into your landfill and they end up in your water eventually, or, because even if it's a good managed landfill, that's fine. But, like in Louisiana, they just, it was what it was. There's still a lot of parts of the country you throw it in the ground and it eventually leaches into your water supply. Those days, you have to be, it's all getting cleaned up now, or attempts to being cleaned up. Like in the new bill, they want to remove all the lead water pipes. There's money in there to do that. So once you've got to that tipping point, now hopefully it doesn't go so far to the other side that it snaps back. But how it is. We've both been through a few cycles.
Well,
even though you're still 29, we've been both through a few cycles, right?
I'll be 29 forever.
That's right.
That's what's scary to me, is kind of knowing now and understanding where we're really at and how far behind we really are on our cleanup and the seriousness of what we have to do and what if we don't.
Well, and what's scary, like I told you earlier, now they throw too much money at things. Like I saw this morning, the Florida lawmakers want $200 million to fix that lake that's leaking. Well, I could have cleaned it up for $100,000. Okay, so some of these things have got to get, just education will get out there.
It'll take time.
It'll take time.
How
until then, I'll tell them I can clean up for 190 million, right?
Yes, heck, even 100 million.
There you go. But it's but no, it's interesting though. And groups like yours, you're getting the word out to a lot of people. That's all that matters, is education.
Yeah. Well, and however we can continue to support you, I would love to do a Q&A panel and actually talk a little bit more about this and bring an audience, some of our group, give people an opportunity to ask questions and really dive into why and how and what. So I'd love to offer that as well.
And we do a lot in the hemp industry. After NOCO, I gave a speech at the Oklahoma Hemp last weekend. Then I'm going down to Florida for the Florida Hemp. So anytime we're invited, we give speeches at and presentations at hemp conferences because the two go so well together.
Is it the Florida U.S. Hemp Growers Expo or whatever?
In Orlando? The
Yeah.
one in Orlando? Yeah.
I'll see you there.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm starting trying to make my rounds again. I'm so glad events are out and it's so much different.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, however I can help support you, you stay in touch. Let me know. I shared your contact information, like I said, so anybody that's looking to reach out to James, don't hesitate to do so, or call me if you have questions or need anything. Find us at globalhempassociation.org. And again, all of our content, past interviews, videos, everything like that is available on Patreon. So
yeah, and we're an open book. So if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer them as they email them in or whatever. You know, there's nothing here secret. Everything's patented. So if you find yourself in Northern Colorado, you want to see how this is made, drop by.
Awesome. 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 James, thank you so much for your time. I'll be in touch and holler at me.
Thank you. You have a good one.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.